I've been trying to think of what the background to representationalism is and why that is um, still such a powerful metaphor for cognitive science, for psychology, for uh, all forms of science, really, when they discuss human beings. And I think it stems from the tradition of naturalism. And naturalism is a word, I mean, whenever a philosopher or a scientist wants to interpret data or um, write an essay of some kind that they want to contribute to our view of the true world, they're going to say, I'm a naturalist, because when we hear that word, we immediately associate it with the idea that, okay, I'm going to remain committed to the facts. I'm not going to make anything up. I'm just going to look at what's there and write it down. I'm not going to invent supernatural causes. Um, and there's a strong and a weak naturalism. A weaker naturalism isn't going to necessarily say that there is no supernatural and that the supernatural does not exist. Whereas a more metaphysical naturalism is going to say there is no supernatural because we can't study it. So it must not science. The method of science as we have it set up today, it can't study it. So there must not be a supernatural. So there's a strong and a weak. Um, but basically, they both agree that all non-natural values can be reduced to some kind of epiphenomenon that arises accidentally from the random um, physical forces running through nature, and it's sort of um, it seems that in that sense that the probability that intelligent life would ever sprout up is extremely rare, you would think, because it's just this chance coming together of molecules, and there's no deeper desire to become what it is. It's just a complete random chaotic accident. Um, and naturalism is also going to want to say that all existence is physical. And what they mean by physical is that it's objective. It exists outside the mind prior to there being a mind, and the mind is always subject to it. That's the physical world. That's the external world that naturalism is always committed to. That's what comes first for naturalism. It's materialist in that sense, and that is definitely an ontological stance. That's a philosophical stance. So that would be a stronger type of naturalism. That's not a scientific stance. Um, but to get some history, some historical perspective on naturalism, we have to really go back to, I mean, they say a few of the Greeks really got it started. Aristotle, perhaps, who was certainly more empirical than his predecessor, Plato. So he got the ball rolling for naturalistic science. But then, the scholastic philosophers worked on it, basically just copying Aristotle. And then Francis Bacon and Galileo started. Galileo, I believe, formulated deduction, and that is a part of naturalism. But naturalism is typically more of an inductive um, methodology, and that Francis Bacon was really the one who formalized uh, induction. Um, and induction is basically the experimental method. You create a hypothesis, and then you test the hypothesis with an experiment. So, in other words, you're asserting a premise into the world, and you're watching how the world reacts to that premise. Basically, think of you're sticking a stick into the gears, and you're seeing how the machine breaks down, and you can reason from that your initial assumption, your initial hypothesis was either correct or incorrect based on what happens. You predict what's going to happen before it happens. And it was actually Galileo who said that nature never violates the terms of the laws imposed upon her. And that seems to me to be more of an inductive kind of statement, even though I think Galileo was more of a deductive reasoner, um, more of an if-then So deduction is more of you first you make an observation, um, and then you conclude what might have been the mechanism behind it afterwards. So you observe first, and then you assert a premise. Philosopher Karl Popper, in reaction to specifically inductive reasoning, the inductive form of naturalism, said that the naturalists, believe they have discovered a fact, but they have only imposed a convention. Um, so the convention would be the hypothesis, the assumption you make first, and then when nature responds favorably to your assumption, you believe that your assumption is correct, that your assumption is a fact. But really, it's a convention that will last for now. It's a way of speaking. It's not a physical fact about a state of affairs objective to you. Another philosopher, Alvin Plantinga, said about naturalism, if you exclude the supernatural from science, then if the world or some phenomena in it are supernaturally caused, as most of the world's people believe, you won't be able to reach that truth scientifically. And again, if we can't reach the truth scientifically, naturalistically, then we're led to believe that it's not existent and that it isn't important. And this has some important consequences, I think, and some devastating consequences, specifically and most profoundly in ethics. Because ethics, I mean, if you look at Wittgenstein's Tractatus, he was trying to show what the world of science was, the objective world as it can be represented by propositions, by language. And what he said specifically, though, that ethics, the value that I attribute to my experience, the sense of consciousness, being alive, that is not of the world that science can look at. It is not of the world, but he didn't say it is therefore non-existent. He said it just cannot be known in the way we know objects in the world. It is not among the objects of the world. And in this sense, if we exclude that, I mean, Wittgenstein wanted to exclude, he wanted to break apart the supernatural from the natural and say science can focus on the natural, but the supernatural is for you and you alone, and we can't speak of it, so we must remain silent. But he began to regret that, I think, with his later work, where language, instead of becoming something which could objectively mirror the world scientifically and give a naturalistic explanation for it, he saw language is not description of anything. Again, language creates a form of life, which means language gives rise to a world space, a worldview, a culture, a cultural mythos of understanding and a common tongue, and this common language is what builds our society, and it's value laden. Every statement is full of value, and we can't separate of values from propositions about the world because they're so intertangled. And this is really Wittgenstein trying to do away with mind-body dualism. Mind, of course, being the value-laden sphere of reality, and matter will supposedly be the purposeless, random, accidental conglomerations of forces and particles and whatnot. So what I'm really trying, I mean, all of my posts really on YouTube are trying to look at this problem from Wittgenstein's later perspective, that we can't separate the natural from the supernatural, because obviously if we do that, there's going to be supernatural phenomena. Value, ethics cannot be reduced to biology. We can't do that, because if we do that, we're basically making a philosophical judgment about the quality of our experience when there are better philosophical judgments to be made. I would say that you can't prove empirically, but that you can intuitively know. So yeah, that's it for now.